My name is Elowen Hart, and I'm 33. I'm a mechanical engineer in Austin, and most days, I'm the only woman in the room. That isn't a complaint. It's just a fact that follows me everywhere. Onto job sites where the air smells like metal and dust, into conference rooms where people assume I'm the coordinator until I start asking questions only the person holding the calculations would ask. It means I've learned how to stand steady in steel-toe boots and fluorescent lighting. It means I've learned how to stay precise, calm, and unshakable, even when someone tries to shake me. I'm proud of that. I'm proud that I chose a career where women are rare, not because it's fashionable, but because it's difficult, because it demands competence before charm, because you don't survive long if you can't carry your weight. And I truly believe the man I loved understood that about me, understood how much effort it took just to exist in my world, and how much it mattered to come home to someone who didn't make me fight for space. For almost 2 years, I thought that's what I had. My boyfriend's name is Beckett Moore. Even writing his name used to feel grounding, familiar, like something solid I could lean on without thinking twice. Beckett runs a lifestyle and wellness brand that's become his entire identity. He has a carefully curated online presence, a clean, minimalist aesthetic, and an audience that eats up his messages about self-care, balance, and empowerment. He's the kind of man who can look into a camera, soften his voice, and make people feel like he's speaking directly to them. He's also polished, driven, and relentlessly organized. His life runs on schedules, retreats, content calendars, and carefully timed launches. Sometimes I wondered what he saw in someone like me, someone who comes home smelling like machine oil and heat, someone whose work clothes are chosen for safety, not aesthetics. But we'd been living together for almost 2 years, so I stopped questioning it. I took that as proof that we were solid. I didn't realize stability can be an illusion you pay for by never needing anything. Recently, I went to see my doctor about stomach pain that had been getting worse for months. It started small, a dull ache that showed up at inconvenient times, a heaviness after meals, sharp cramps that made me pause mid-sentence and breathe through them like I was trying not to draw attention. I kept putting it off the way people in demanding careers often do, especially women in fields where weakness is quietly punished. There was always a deadline, always a meeting, always a reason to be tough. So I did what I always do. I worked through it until I couldn't. The pain started waking me up at night. It started showing up while I was standing on the shop floor, narrowing my vision for a second. I caught myself bracing against a workbench more than once, pretending I was studying a drawing so no one would notice my face change. One afternoon, it got bad enough that I had to leave early. I told my supervisor I wasn't feeling well and watched his expression shift into that careful neutrality people use when they don't know how to react to a woman in a serious role suddenly looking human. I drove straight to the clinic. It was one of those painfully ordinary days that later becomes a dividing line in your life, the kind you don't recognize as important until you're already past it. The doctor was calm, almost too calm. He ran tests, ordered imaging, came back holding a folder like this was routine, and for him, it was. Benign tumor, he said evenly. Small intestine, completely treatable. But it needs to come out within 3 weeks. I sat there in the paper gown, the air conditioning too cold, and kept my face neutral while my brain tried to reshape my future around those words. Minimally invasive surgery, he continued. Routine procedure. Recovery time is 4 to 6 weeks. Then he looked at me more carefully. The first 5 to 7 days, he added. You're going to want someone around, just in case. It's not something you should go through alone. I nodded, the same way I nod in meetings when someone explains a complication. Absorbing information, staying composed. But when I walked out of that clinic holding a folder full of pre-op instructions, I felt off, not panicked, not terrified, just aware that something had shifted under my feet. I wasn't scared of the surgery itself. I was scared of what it meant, because for the first time in 2 years, I was going to need Beckett to actually show up for me. Not with affirmations, not with wellness advice, not with carefully chosen words. I needed him there. When I got home, Beckett was at the kitchen island with his laptop open, editing a video. Soft music played under images of desert sunsets and affirmations. He looked up, smiled, and slid his headphones down around his neck. You're home early, he said. I went to the doctor, I replied. His smile stayed, but his eyes sharpened slightly, the way they do when he's preparing to respond correctly. I placed the folder on the counter between us. I have a tumor in my small intestine, I said. It's benign, but it needs to be removed. Surgery. The word hung in the air. He froze, not in fear, not in concern, just still. Then his expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable, like he was already checking dates in his head. "What date?" he asked. "April 21st. He let out a short laugh, half relief, half inconvenience. "That's the week of my Scottsdale retreat," he said immediately. I stared at him. "It's not a conference," I said carefully. "It's surgery." "It's not cancer, right?" he asked. "No, but it still needs to come out." He waved a hand lightly, dismissive without meaning to be. "So you'll be fine." He pulled out his planner and flipped through the pages, fingers moving quickly. "I'll see if I can move my flight," he said. But even as he said it, I could tell he wasn't really considering it. The words were for appearance, not commitment. "The doctor said I'll need someone around the first few days," I added quietly. "Yeah," he said. "We'll figure it out." Not "I'll be there." Not "I've got you." Just "we'll figure it out." Like my body was a problem to be managed. He put his headphones back on and returned to his screen. And I stood there in our kitchen holding a folder full of pre-op instructions, realizing that the one place I thought I didn't have to prove I deserved support might not exist at all. That night I barely slept. Not because I was afraid of surgery, but because I couldn't stop replaying his first reaction. The pause, the calculation, the retreat. And somewhere in the dark, as pain pulsed through my abdomen like a warning light, a thought settled in that I wasn't ready to say out loud yet. If someone's love only works when you don't need anything, that isn't love. It's convenience. And April 21st was coming fast. The next 2 days passed in a strange, suspended quiet. Nothing dramatic happened on the surface. Beckett didn't raise his voice. He didn't explicitly say he was leaving me alone. He didn't do anything obvious enough that I could point to it later and say that was the moment. Instead, he moved through the apartment like the decision had already been made. He took calls with his headphones on. He answered emails out loud from the living room, talking about schedules, deliverables, and how excited people were for Scottsdale. He used the same calm, reassuring tone he used online, the one that made everything sound manageable, as long as it wasn't happening to him. I tried not to read into it. That instinct didn't come from nowhere. In my line of work, reading too much into tone or implication can get you labeled as difficult, so you learn to wait for proof. You learn to give people the benefit of the doubt longer than they deserve. You learn to assume competence before malice. By the second night, the painkillers were doing just enough to dull the edge without making me feel normal. My abdomen felt tight and bruised from the inside, like something was pressing where it didn't belong. I curled up on the couch with a blanket while Beckett moved back and forth between the bedroom and the hallway. That was when the packing started. He laid out his suitcases, the hard-shell black ones he only used for work trips, on the bed. Camera gear came out of the closet first, lenses wrapped carefully, chargers, batteries, microphones lined up with methodical precision. Everything was organized, intentional, already planned. Branded apparel followed, neutral tones, clean cuts, clothes chosen not for comfort, but for how they would read on camera. Watching him prepare felt surreal. Not because I didn't know he was going, but because every item he packed made it more real that he was choosing to go. I sat on the couch, my body heavy, my head slightly fogged, listening to the steady sound of zippers and clasps closing. The rhythm of it carried through the apartment, too loud for something so ordinary. At some point, he came into the living room holding another bag, phone balanced in his other hand. "You okay?" he asked casually, eyes still on the screen. "I just need someone home the first few days," I said. My voice surprised me with how quiet it was. Not emotional, not accusing, just honest. He stopped. Then he turned toward me, and his expression shifted, not into concern, but into something tight and defensive. "You're being manipulative," he said. The word landed harder than the diagnosis. I straightened slightly, like my body needed to meet it head-on. "What?" I asked. "You always need something right when I have something important," he continued. Every time. I stared at him. This was the same man who spoke publicly about emotional safety, about support, about honoring your partner's needs. And here he was, telling me my surgery was poorly timed for his career. "I didn't plan this," I said evenly. "I didn't choose the date." "I know," he replied quickly, "but it's the timing. You'll be fine. You always are." Something shifted inside me at that. Not a crack. A slide, like a support beam quietly moving out of place. I realized how long I had been making my needs smaller so they would fit around his life. How often I'd rearranged my schedule, downplayed my exhaustion, told myself love meant flexibility and patience. And now, when I finally needed something unavoidable, something physical, something real, I was being accused of manipulation. I didn't argue. I didn't list what I'd done for him. I didn't remind him of late nights or weekends or the ways I'd already bent. I just nodded. Okay, I said, I'll figure it out. He relaxed immediately. Like tension he hadn't acknowledged drained out of him. Good, he said. I knew you'd understand. Understand. The word felt empty. He went back to packing. That night, I lay awake listening to him move beside me, already half gone. My stomach throbbed dully. My thoughts circled the same realization again and again, as if my mind was testing it, hoping it would change shape. I had been proud of how supportive I was. I had told myself that being strong meant not asking for too much. But lying there in the dark, I began to wonder when being understanding had quietly turned into being optional. The knock came the next morning. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I found Marlene, the woman who lived across the hall. She was in her late 60s, silver hair pulled into a neat bun, posture straight in the way people carry themselves when they've spent a lifetime being responsible. I hope I'm not intruding, she said gently. The walls here are thin, and I couldn't help overhearing a bit last night. My face warmed with embarrassment. I used to be a nurse, she added quickly. Retired now. I just wanted to check on you. Something about her voice, steady, unpolished, sincere, made my throat tighten. I'm having surgery, I said. She didn't panic, didn't overreact. She nodded once. All right, she said. Then you're not doing this alone. The simplicity of it hit me harder than anything Beckett had said in days. She offered to drive me to my pre-op appointment, to check in on me, to be nearby if I needed help. I thanked her, probably more than necessary. The morning of my pre-op appointment, Beckett left early for Arizona. He kissed my forehead by the door, already distracted, phone in hand. Stay positive, he said lightly. Manifest healing energy. I watched him roll his suitcase down the hall, and when the door closed behind him, something unexpected settled over me. Relief, not abandonment. Relief, because for the first time in days, the silence didn't feel like neglect. It felt honest. The apartment felt different the moment Beckett left. Not emptier, quieter. The kind of quiet that doesn't press in on you, but settles, like the space finally matches the truth of what's happening. No calls taken on speaker, no keyboard clicks, no voice practicing reassurance for an audience that wasn't here. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator, the low city noise outside the windows. I moved slowly that morning, careful with my body. Every motion felt deliberate now, sitting down, standing up, reaching for a glass of water and waiting for the dull ache to decide whether it would flare or fade. I kept thinking I would feel sadder. Instead, I felt focused. At 9:30, there was another knock. This time, I knew who it was before I opened the door. Marlene stood there holding her keys, a light jacket folded over her arm, like she'd been ready for a while. She smiled when she saw me. Not overly bright, not pitying, just present. Ready? She asked. I nodded. The drive to the clinic was quiet in the easiest way. She didn't fill the space with questions, didn't ask how scared I was, or try to reassure me with platitudes. She talked about traffic, about the construction on the corner that had been dragging on for months, about how Austin never quite decided what season it wanted to be. Halfway there, she glanced over. Do you want company inside? She asked. Or would you rather I wait? Inside, I said without hesitation. She nodded again, like that was the most natural answer in the world. The pre-op appointment went exactly how they always do. Forms, explanations, timelines repeated carefully. Risks outlined calmly. Instructions emphasized twice. I listened, asked questions, took notes. This was familiar territory for me. Systems, procedures, known variables. But when they handed me the stack of paperwork at the end, my hands trembled slightly. Marlene noticed. She didn't comment. She just placed her hand lightly over mine for a brief second, grounding, then let go. That small, quiet gesture stayed with me long after we left. Back at the apartment, I rested on the couch while Marlene made tea in the kitchen like she'd done it 100 times before. She didn't rearrange anything, didn't ask where things were more than once. She moved through the space respectfully, like she understood it wasn't hers, but she was welcome anyway. Before she left, she paused at the door. You've got my number, she said. Day or night. No need to hesitate. I won't, I promised. And I realized I meant it. The day before surgery passed in a blur of preparation, showering with the antiseptic soap they'd given me, changing sheets, setting alarms, lining up medications on the counter like a checklist. I kept waiting for Beckett to call. He didn't. No text, no missed call, no message asking how I was feeling or if I needed anything. I told myself he was busy, that retreats are intense, that this was normal. But late that night, when I sat on the edge of the bed scrolling aimlessly through my phone, his name stayed silent at the top of my screen. Sleep came in short, shallow bursts. The morning of surgery arrived gray and early. Marlene was there before my alarm went off. She drove me to the hospital, parked without complaint, walked me inside. The waiting area smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. At intake, the nurse handed me a clipboard. "Emergency contact," she said, pointing to the line. I picked up the pen and stopped. My mind went blank in a way that surprised me. Beckett's name hovered there, familiar, automatic. The name I'd written on forms for years without thinking. The one people expected. But my hand didn't move. 30 seconds passed. It felt longer. The nurse waited patiently, eyes flicking between the screen and my face without pressure. I thought about Beckett in Arizona, about schedules and content calendars, and the way he'd said, "We'll figure it out," like this was a problem already solved. I thought about Marlene standing beside me without asking for anything in return. And then my hand moved. I wrote Marlene's name, her number. The nurse glanced down at the clipboard, then back at me. Her expression didn't change, but something in her eyes sharpened. Recognition. "Good call," she said simply. Her name badge read Camille. She guided me through the rest of intake with steady efficiency. She explained what would happen next, what to expect when I woke up, where my belongings would go. "Any questions?" she asked at the end. I shook my head. As they wheeled me toward pre-op, I felt strangely calm. Not fearless. Clear. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took hold was not fear of the surgery, but the quiet certainty that the person listed as my emergency contact was the one who had shown up when it mattered. When I woke up, everything felt thick and distant. My mouth was dry, my body heavy. Camille was there, adjusting my IV. "Hey," she said gently, "the surgery went well." Relief washed through me, slow and steady. Time blurred after that. Voices came and went. Someone checked my vitals. Someone offered ice chips. It wasn't until later that a sound cut through the haze. Camille's voice, just outside my room. "Yes, ma'am," she said professionally. "We can confirm the patient is receiving appropriate post-operative care." A pause. "For specific updates, you would need to speak with the patient directly." Another pause. "She is resting," Camille said, "and she is stable." Click. A few minutes later, Camille stepped into my room. "Your boyfriend called the nurse's station," she said matter-of-factly. I blinked at her. "He did?" She nodded. "He was asking for an update." Relief flickered, then confusion followed. "He didn't call me," I said. Camille's expression didn't change. "He didn't ask to speak to you," she replied. Something cold settled low in my stomach. "He wanted a statement," she added, "for his followers." The words landed slowly. Statement. Followers. Lying there with monitors quietly beeping beside me, clarity arrived, fully formed. Beckett hadn't called to check on me. He had called to manage a narrative. And whatever that meant for the rest of my life, I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't over. I should have shut it down right then. That's the thought that comes back to me now, sharper than any physical pain I felt that week. I should have told Camille to block his number. I should have asked for a supervisor. I should have drawn a clean line before the situation had a chance to metastasize into something else entirely. But lying there in that hospital bed, groggy and stitched and exhausted, I didn't yet understand how far Beckett was willing to take it. I assumed, naively, that his call had been awkward concern filtered through habit, that maybe he didn't know how to switch off public mode, even in a private emergency. That once he realized I was stable, he'd text, apologize, adjust. So I said nothing. The afternoon passed quietly. I slept. I woke. Camille checked my vitals with the same calm efficiency she'd shown all morning. At some point, Marlene came by, carrying a small tote with my phone charger, lip balm, and a paperback she thought I might like. She sat with me for a while, talking about nothing in particular, then squeezed my hand before leaving. "You rest," she said. "I'll be back tomorrow." It wasn't until early evening that my sister Rachel texted, "Are you okay?" I stared at the message, confused. "I'm fine," I typed back. "Surgery went well." There was a pause, then my phone buzzed again. "What is Beckett doing?" My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" I asked. She sent screenshots. The first one made my vision blur. Beckett had gone live on Instagram from a hotel room in Scottsdale. The lighting was soft. The framing was perfect. His face filled the screen, eyes red, voice strained. The caption beneath the video read, "She is in surgery. They won't tell me if she's stable. Please pray for Elowen." A broken heart emoji, a hashtag already starting to trend. I felt like the air had been pulled out of the room. The video played automatically. Beckett spoke in a low, emotional tone about how terrifying it was to be so far away, about how the hospital was being vague, about how he was trying to read between the lines of what the nurses were saying, about how scared he was that they wouldn't even confirm she's stable. None of it was true. They had confirmed it. To him, through Camille. My phone buzzed again. More screenshots. Comments flooding in. Messages from strangers. Offers of prayers. Virtual hugs. Then another image appeared. A PayPal link for hospital costs. I felt sick. Not metaphorically. Physically. I turned my head to the side and closed my eyes, breathing carefully until the nausea passed. My body had just been cut open. My immune system was compromised. My nervous system was fried. And somewhere in Arizona, my boyfriend was monetizing my recovery. Camille came in not long after, carrying her tablet. "So," she said lightly, trying to keep the moment from feeling heavier than it already was. "You're famous." She held the screen where I could see it. The post. The caption. The comments. I stared at it, unable to look away. Apparently, dying made me marketable. Camille exhaled slowly through her nose. "He's called 3 more times today," she said. "Same questions. Same standard answers." "What did you tell him?" I asked. "What we're allowed to tell anyone," she replied. "That you're resting. That you're receiving appropriate care. That we can't discuss specifics." She shook her head slightly. "He keeps turning normal hospital protocol into a medical thriller," she added, "like we're hiding something." I swallowed. In his videos, Beckett took those same phrases, resting, appropriate care, cannot disclose specifics, and twisted them into implications. He spoke about secrecy, about fear, about being shut out during his girlfriend's darkest hour. Meanwhile, I was sitting up in bed, propped against pillows, watching a cooking show rerun and eating lime jello. The disconnect was unreal. I knew I should have intervened. I knew that by staying silent, I was letting him build a story without me. But watching him perform grief for an audience while I recovered alone did something unexpected. It stripped away the last layer of denial. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt clear. This wasn't panic. This wasn't poor communication. This wasn't a misunderstanding amplified by social media. This was intention. He had taken my medical emergency and turned it into content. And now that content had taken on a life of its own, one that needed escalation to survive. By the next morning, the donations had climbed into the thousands. People were sending flowers to the hospital, cards, messages addressed to the brave girlfriend fighting for her life. Nurses at the desk were fielding calls from well-meaning strangers asking for updates. Camille handled it all with professional calm, but I could see the irritation flicker behind her eyes. "This happens sometimes," she told me quietly. "Not usually like this." I nodded. The comments on Beckett's post started shifting by midday. Someone asked why he'd posted spa photos the day before if I was in surgery. Someone else pointed out the location tags didn't match the timeline he was describing. Screenshots appeared. Side-by-side comparisons. Retreat footage timestamped to the exact hours I was in the operating room. The internet, it turned out, was very good at math. I stared at my phone as the narrative he'd built began to wobble. I wondered, briefly, what he thought would happen next. If he believed he could keep controlling the story. If he'd already convinced himself that his version was the truth. By late afternoon, Camille came in with an update. "Just so you know," she said, "your boyfriend booked an earlier flight." My chest tightened. "He's coming back," she added, "tonight." I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the machines hum around me. Part of me wondered what he expected to find. The other part already knew. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of the pain, that was managed. Not because of fear, that had burned itself out days ago. It was the waiting. The kind that stretches thin and sharp, where your mind keeps circling the same questions even though you already know the answers. Beckett landed just after midnight. I knew because Camille told me when she came in to check my vitals, her voice deliberately casual. "He's here," she said, "in the building." I nodded once. "Do you want to see him?" she asked. The answer came out of me before I had time to soften it. "No." Camille didn't look surprised. "All right," she said, "then I'll handle it." She left, and I imagined her stepping into the hallway with that same calm authority, explaining policies, setting boundaries, refusing access with professionalism that left no room for argument. I pictured Beckett standing there with his phone in his hand, already rehearsing the angle, the lighting, the tone of concern he'd perfected for his audience. The thought made my stomach turn. An hour later, my phone buzzed. A text from him. "I'm here. They won't let me see you. Please tell me you're okay." I stared at the screen. For the first time since this began, I didn't feel tempted to respond. If I answered, it would become content. If I reassured him, it would become proof that his performance was justified. If I argued, it would become drama. Silence was the only thing he couldn't monetize. So I put the phone face down on the tray table and closed my eyes. In the early morning, before the sky fully lightened, the internet finished what it had started. Rachel texted again, this time with a single sentence. "It's blowing up." She sent link after link, threads dissecting the timeline, clips from Beckett's retreat videos placed next to screenshots of his hospital posts, people pointing out the continuity errors, the location tags, the inconsistencies in his emotional arc. One comment, liked thousands of times, stood out. "If she was dying, why were you filming content at a spa the same day?" Another, "You left her for a retreat, then pretended the hospital was hiding information to raise money." By mid-morning, sponsors began pulling out. Quietly at first. Emails sent, contracts paused, statements worded carefully. Then louder. Public announcements. Values misalignment. Concerns about transparency. Wishing all parties the best. Camille came in with my breakfast tray and an expression that told me she already knew. "Your phone's been busy," she said gently. I nodded. "I'm sorry you're dealing with this on top of everything else," she added. "I'm not," I said. The words surprised both of us. "I think I needed to see it," I continued. "All of it." She studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "Sometimes people reveal themselves when they think they're in control," she said, "and forget who's actually watching." By noon, Beckett posted a response video. No tears this time, just controlled frustration, defensive calm. He talked about how women shouldn't be punished for ambition. I almost laughed. The top comment appeared within minutes. "You're not being criticized for ambition. You're being criticized for leaving your partner during surgery and turning it into a fundraiser." That comment alone had thousands of likes. I watched the numbers on his account drop in real time. Tens of thousands of followers gone in hours. Brand pages quietly unfollowing him. His carefully curated image unraveling faster than he could reframe it. And through all of it, he kept texting me. "Please talk to me. I didn't mean for it to get out of hand. I was just trying to keep people informed. You know how the internet is." I didn't respond. Because the truth was simple, and I didn't need to explain it to him. He hadn't been trying to protect me. He had been trying to protect his image. Late that afternoon, Camille came in with paperwork. "They're going to keep you one more night," she said, "just to be safe." I nodded, relieved. She hesitated at the door. "For what it's worth," she added, "you handled this with a lot of grace." I met her eyes. "I didn't do anything," I said. She shook her head slightly. "You didn't give him what he wanted," she replied. "That counts." That evening, I watched the sun dip below the city skyline through the narrow hospital window. Somewhere in the building, Beckett was still waiting, still hoping for a scene, a reconciliation, a moment he could salvage. But I wasn't there anymore. And for the first time, that felt like power. My discharge was supposed to happen that morning. Camille had told me the night before, one more set of labs, one more round of monitoring, and if everything looked good, I'd be out by noon. But bodies don't always follow plans. Mine didn't. A minor complication, nothing dangerous, nothing dramatic, meant the doctors wanted to keep me one more day for observation. When Camille explained it, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. Not because I wanted to stay in the hospital, but because it bought me time. Time before facing Beckett. Time before whatever version of reality he was preparing to sell next. Late that morning, Camille came in with her coffee, glanced out the window, and stopped mid-step. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered. "What?" I asked. She tilted her head toward the glass. "Look." From my bed, I could see part of the hospital parking lot below. Rows of cars, a delivery van pulling out, a man pacing near the entrance with his phone in his hand. Beckett's car was parked crookedly near the curb. The engine was still running. He was sitting behind the wheel, phone mounted on the dashboard, adjusting the angle with practiced precision. He leaned forward, checked the frame, leaned back, ran a hand through his hair, exhaled slowly. Then he started recording. Not crying, not breaking down. His jaw was tight, his shoulders rigid, his voice low and controlled, strained in a way that suggested pressure, not panic. "I just want answers," he said into the camera. "They won't even confirm if she's alive." He paused, not to compose himself emotionally, but to let the silence do the work. I stared out the window, my chest completely still. This wasn't desperation. This was strategy. Camille crossed her arms. "You want me to let him in?" she asked. "No," I said immediately. The certainty in my own voice surprised me. She glanced at me, searching for hesitation. "There wasn't any." "No," I repeated. "He can wait in the lobby, or his car, wherever." Camille nodded once. "Understood." As she left, I kept watching. Beckett stopped recording. Checked the playback. Deleted it. Recorded again. Same angle, same posture, same controlled tension. He wasn't unraveling. He was refining. That was the moment something detached completely inside me. Because men like Beckett don't lose control when things go wrong. They tighten it. While he worked the camera, the internet finished turning on him. Rachel's texts came in rapid succession. Someone recognized the background from his retreat videos. Same day as your surgery. They're posting side-by-side screenshots. I opened my phone. There it was. Beckett at a spa in Scottsdale wrapped in a robe, talking about renewal and self-focus. Time-stamped the same day I was in the operating room. Next to it, his hospital parking lot videos. His tense jaw. His claims of silence and fear. The math didn't require interpretation. Twitter exploded first. Then everything else followed. Influencer watchdog accounts picked it up. Commentary channels posted breakdowns with headlines that didn't soften anything. He left his girlfriend for a retreat, then pretended she was dying. By early afternoon, the tone shifted from confusion to anger. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It was a pattern. Sponsors moved quickly, not quietly. 3 major brand partners issued statements within hours. Campaigns paused. Contracts under review. Some cut ties outright. Rachel sent one final message. He's losing everything. I read it once. Then I locked my phone. I didn't feel satisfied. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. Later that afternoon, Beckett posted another video. This one was colder, defensive. I'm being punished for having commitments, he said flatly. For not dropping everything the moment the internet decided I should. The top comment appeared almost immediately. You're not being criticized for success. You're being criticized for abandoning your partner during surgery and turning it into content. Thousands of likes. Camille came in to check my vitals, glanced at my phone, then shook her head. People like him don't panic, she said quietly. They perform pressure. That night, as the hospital settled into its low, steady rhythm, I lay awake replaying the image of him in the car. Not crying, not breaking, just adjusting the angle. And for the first time, I understood the truth I'd been avoiding for years. He never showed emotion unless it served a purpose. And the moment I stopped playing my role, the performance collapsed. They discharged me the next morning. Camille came in just after 8 with paperwork tucked under her arm and that same steady expression she always wore, like she'd learned long ago how to move through chaos without letting it stick. You're good to go, she said. Vitals look solid, pain's under control. Just take it slow. I nodded, already dressed in the softest clothes I owned. Movements careful but deliberate. My body felt tender, stitched together in places I couldn't see, but my mind was sharper than it had been in weeks. As Camille went over the instructions, I noticed the way she hesitated near the end, the way she chose her words. One more thing, she said. He's downstairs. I didn't ask who. In the lobby, she continued, with flowers. I let out a slow breath. And cameras, she added quietly. Of course. Marlene arrived a few minutes later, carrying my small overnight bag like it weighed nothing. She looked me over carefully, the way someone does when they're checking not just your body, but your spirit. You ready? She asked. Yes, I said. And I meant it. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. I caught my reflection in the metal doors, pale, a little thinner, eyes clear in a way they hadn't been before. When the doors opened, the sound hit first. Voices, echoing footsteps, the low murmur of a public space where private things sometimes spill out. Then I saw him. Beckett stood near the center of the lobby, perfectly placed beneath the brightest lights. He held a bouquet of white flowers, pristine and oversized. 2 men stood a few feet behind him, assistants, I assumed, each holding professional cameras, already powered on. He spotted me instantly. His posture straightened. His face shifted into something rehearsed, relief mixed with concern, calibrated for an audience. Elowen, he said, stepping forward. The cameras moved with him. I stopped. Not because I was weak, because I wanted him to hear me clearly. You brought your vlog cameras, I said. My voice carried easily in the open space, calm, unraised. Beckett's smile flickered, just for a second. People want closure, he replied quickly. They've been really worried. I glanced past him at the cameras, then back at him. Then give it to them, I said. I stepped around him. The bouquet hovered uselessly in the air between us. Elowen, wait, he said, lowering his voice, urgency creeping in. We need to talk. No, I replied. The word landed cleanly. Final. Marlene moved beside me without hesitation. Camille stood a little farther back, arms crossed, watching everything with clinical detachment. Beckett reached out, not to touch me, but to angle himself back into my line of sight, like he was trying to reframe the shot. This isn't how this ends, he said quietly. I met his eyes. This ended when you turned my surgery into content, I said. You just didn't notice. For the first time since this started, something cracked in his expression. Not remorse. Fear. Not of losing me, but of losing control of the story. Please, he said, just say something. They need to hear it from you. I shook my head. They don't, I said, and you don't get to use my silence to fill another frame. I walked past him toward the exit. As the automatic doors slid open, I heard him turn to his assistants. Did you get that? He asked. The doors closed before I could hear the answer. Outside, the air felt different. Cooler. Cleaner. Marlene helped me into her car, adjusted the seat gently, then closed the door. As she walked around to the driver's side, I leaned my head back and let myself breathe. The confrontation hadn't been loud. There were no raised voices, no dramatic declarations, just a boundary drawn so clearly it couldn't be edited. As we pulled away from the hospital, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. For the first time in a long time, the story was finally mine again. I moved out 2 days later. Not in the dramatic way people expect. No shouting, no confrontations, no long explanations that give the other person something to argue against. Just boxes. A couple of duffel bags, my work boots by the door, the mug I always reach for without thinking. I waited until Beckett was gone, out, handling things, as he'd put it in one of the many messages I never responded to. Then I packed what was mine and left the rest exactly where it was. I didn't take anything sentimental. I didn't want to carry ghosts into whatever came next. The guest house Marlene helped me find sat behind a larger property a few blocks from her place. It was small, quiet, and a little imperfect. There was a narrow kitchen, a bedroom with a window that caught the morning light, and a patch of garden out back that looked like it had been neglected just long enough to be hopeful again. No cameras, no ring lights, no content calendars taped to the fridge. The first night I slept there, I woke up disoriented, not from pain, but from silence. The good kind, the kind that doesn't demand anything from you. I left my phone face down on the counter and didn't turn it over until morning. When I finally did, there were dozens of notifications waiting. Beckett's apology video had dropped overnight. It was titled My Truth About Everything. I didn't watch it. Rachel did, though, and she summarized it in 3 short texts. He says there was miscommunication. He says he was trying to keep people informed. He says the internet is being unfair. I sighed and set the phone back down. Later that afternoon, Camille texted me. Someone had identified her in one of the hospital photos Beckett had posted. The corner of her scrubs visible in the background, her name badge half obscured. Apparently, she'd commented directly under one of his videos. We provided standard post-operative updates. The patient was resting and receiving appropriate care. No information was withheld. It had thousands of likes within hours. Camille, who had never asked for attention and clearly didn't want it, had become briefly famous for telling the truth. 2 days, she wrote. That's about 2 days longer than I want to be internet adjacent. I laughed out loud for the first time since surgery. The fallout continued without me. Sponsors didn't come back. Followers didn't return. Beckett pivoted, then pivoted again. Wellness to mindset coaching to something vague about rebuilding authenticity. I watched none of it. Instead, I focused on smaller things. Walking carefully around the block every morning, feeling my strength come back inch by inch. Making simple meals, sitting in the garden with a cup of coffee and no agenda. Marlene checked in daily, never hovering, never intruding. How's the pain? Better. Good. Call if it isn't. That was it. No performance, no commentary. Just presence. One afternoon, volunteering at the hospital, something I'd started doing once a week in the pediatric ward, reading to kids whose days needed something gentler, I met Samuel Reed. He worked there, a social worker, practical shoes, tired eyes, the kind of presence that didn't try to impress anyone. We talked over coffee in the cafeteria after my shift ended. Nothing heavy, nothing performative. When I mentioned the surgery in passing, he didn't ask to see the scar. He asked if it still hurt. That was the difference. We took it slow. No announcements, no labels rushed into place, just conversation, shared walks, quiet check-ins that didn't feel like auditions. Once, while we were standing outside a cafe, I saw Beckett across the street. He looked smaller. Not physically. Something else. Like the space around him no longer bent to accommodate his story. He hesitated when he saw me, then crossed over, alone. No cameras, no assistants, no audience. Hey, he said. Hey, I replied. He started to speak, something about mistakes, about missing me, about how things got out of control, but I stopped him gently. I hope you're doing well, I said. And I meant it. Not because I forgave what he did, but because I no longer needed him to be anything in my story. He nodded, swallowed, and walked away. That night, lying in bed with Charlie curled against my side, I thought about the moment in the hospital when I'd written Marlene's name on that form, how my hand had known something my mind was still arguing with. I used to believe being supportive meant enduring whatever someone asked of you. I don't anymore. The people who matter show up quietly. They bring coffee. They sit with you when you're scared. They don't ask you to perform strength for an audience. They don't need proof. They just stay. Sometimes I think about that moment in the hospital more than any other. Not the surgery, not the parking lot videos, not even the lobby confrontation with the cameras and the flowers. Just the clipboard, the nurse standing patiently beside me, the pen in my hand, the blank space labeled emergency contact. I remember how long I sat there. 30 seconds doesn't sound like much, but when you're lying on a hospital bed with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead and your life quietly tilting off its axis, it feels like a long time. Long enough for instinct to outrun logic. Long enough for your body to answer a question your mind is still negotiating. My hand didn't hesitate because I was angry. It hesitated because it already knew. For years, I had told myself that being supportive meant being flexible, that love meant adjusting, that strength meant enduring. Especially as a woman in a field that doesn't make space for softness, I'd learned to carry more than my share without complaint. At work, that discipline served me. In my relationship, it erased me. Lying in that hospital bed later, watching a man I thought loved me turn my vulnerability into content, I finally understood the difference between patience and self-abandonment. Patience waits for growth. Self-abandonment waits forever. The people who mattered most during that week didn't say much. They didn't frame moments. They didn't ask for updates to share. They showed up quietly. Marlene drove me places and never once made it about sacrifice. Camille did her job with integrity and didn't bend the truth for anyone's narrative. Even strangers online, people I'd never meet, saw through the performance faster than I did, not because they knew me, but because they recognized the pattern. And that recognition gave me permission to trust myself again. I used to think love had to be loud to be real. Now I know the opposite is true. Real love doesn't announce itself. It doesn't monetize pain. It doesn't need witnesses. It's the coffee left on the counter, the quiet question. Does it still hurt? The steady presence when there's nothing to gain. I don't regret the relationship I had, but I don't miss the version of myself who stayed in it. Sometimes people ask if I feel embarrassed about how public everything became, about the videos, the comments, the spectacle. I don't, because the most important moment of that entire story happened off camera. It happened when no one was watching. When I chose, without fanfare, the person who showed up over the person who performed. Turns out I was always going to be fine. I just needed the silence to hear myself again.